Hey guys, welcome back to Bringing Home a Bishop. My name is Kristen and this is my blog for all things international adoption. Videos 1 and 2 were an introduction on me and my family and our family's adoption journey, as well as a little bit of a history of international adoption as a whole. And today what I'd like to do is really start to dive in to the process itself and really how to get started. If you're still watching, you're somewhere in the process of maybe determining if international adoption is right for you, or maybe you've signed a couple pieces of paper and you're just really trying to get some information. But the good news is, regardless of where you are, you're in the right place because we can help with all of that. So where to start? The number one piece of advice that I give to all of my friends and family that are interested in international adoption is to have the hard conversations now. Between as a family unit, as husband and wife, as partners, you need to determine what are you okay with and what scares you and what can your family reasonably accommodate right now without much preparation. Because what will happen is you'll start looking at files of children and they're all just precious, and it becomes really difficult and those lines get really blurred as to the conversations that you've had previously and what you feel comfortable that you can accommodate and what you cannot. And so to give you an example, one of the conversations that my husband and I had early on for our first adoption was we were pretty comfortable with any kind of non-correctable special need. We were okay with cognitive delays. We were okay with the typical like Down syndrome. We were okay with those things, but we were not okay with a child that was going to need lasting mobility help. A child that was wheelchair bound, just simply because our home is not laid out for it, and it wouldn't be, it would need massive accommodations to make sure that that child could get around. We're talking taking down walls, we're talking about installing chair lifts and blocking off stairways. I mean, it would have been a massive renovation, a massive undertaking. We're also a very active family, and so that's a really important thing to take into consideration is what is your family's lifestyle like? And what adding a child that has a non-correctable special need, will that child be able to integrate into your family unit, or will it be a complete and total disruption? Because adoption in itself is very disrupting. So when you're adding a child that doesn't necessarily fit into your lifestyle, that can be really, really hard, especially if you have other children that are accustomed to maybe hiking and running and swimming and camping and all of these things, where if you have a child with medical needs, it's really difficult to do those things because you need to be within a certain distance of a hospital and you have medical equipment. So all of those things you want to take into consideration. None of them are right or wrong. It's just a matter of what is better for your family. Now, having said that, today, having already adopted my son and about to finalize the adoption of my daughter, I think our needs and our conversations would be a little bit different, and we might be open to those types of needs. But those are just an idea of things to get your wheels turning on the conversations that you should be having right now, so that when you get to the point in your home study, it's not a surprise and you're not having that conversation for the first time. Then the second step is going to be researching the country. And the country is very important for multiple reasons. Every country has very specific guidelines on what they allow for their adoptive parents to look like, to medications that they're on, how long they've been married, whether or not they allow same-sex marriages. That's a big one now as well. So when you're starting to look into countries, you want to find a country that allows for whatever your family unit looks like, will permit you to adopt their children. That sounds really, really funny, I know, because there's an orphan and there's a family, and so one would think that it should just be okay. But I don't, I think that we have to realize that culturally, some countries are not in the same place as we are. So when you start to look for countries, you're going to want to, number one, make sure the country's adoption programs are stable and they're open, because Many countries over the past few years have started to close down adoptions in general for a multitude of different reasons. One of my videos previously talked about the history of adoption and some of the things that have happened over the course of history that have made the international adoption as a whole go through these periods of reforms and countries having to close and etc. So make sure your country of interest is open. Make sure it's accepting new applications into the country as well as you want to make sure that your family can sustain the travel that's needed. That's something you don't want to get to the end and realize, oh no, I have to be in the country for 3 months and I can't do that because I have other kids back home and I have a job and all of those things. So you want to really do your research on your country in the very, very beginning, because although you can change countries, it is very expensive. It is a lot of extra time to have to redo home studies, which brings me to my next point. Home studies are country specific. So you'll need to pick your country before you really start getting too far into your home study. There's some things that you can do, but realistically, your home study is going to be very specific to the country that you choose. For instance, Asian countries require sometimes psychological evaluations while other countries do not. That is an added extra expense that most families don't plan for. So your home study as a whole consists of a few things. It's going to consist of every single background check that is known to man, your country, your city, your state, your FBI, like all of the background checks. There's a joke in my family that we are professionally licensed to parent because of all of the education and the background checks. And it is a hefty season of paperwork. It kind of feels like buying a house, having a baby, buying a car, and I'm trying to think of something else that has a lot of paperwork all at the same time. It's a lot of paperwork, and you have to be very organized or you will lose your mind. Typically, a regular home study will consist of things like I just said, the background study, the psychological evaluation, your medical evaluation, your vital records, your taxes and finances, your personal interview, your family interview. My social worker met with me and my husband separate as well as together, and then with my children that were over a certain age, just to make sure that everyone was on the same page as far as moving forward with the adoption, and really to help us identify as parents if our kids maybe had some feelings that they weren't willing to discuss. In the next video, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the home study as far as how to prepare for your home study and how to get yourself organized so that you really can knock it out in the shortest amount of time possible. And before I get there, I just want to leave you with this little tidbit that there are two different pathways when it comes to international adoption. And this is something that you'll want to consider also before you really decide to hire your home study agency and move forward. There's a traditional pathway, which is you do your home study, you complete your dossier, you send it to the country, they then match you with a child that might fit for your family, and you get to say yes or no and what have you. And then there's also a Waiting Child Way, which are the advocacy sites that you may have heard of, which is Reese's Rainbow, Rainbow Kids International. Those websites advocate for children that have special needs that might be a little bit harder to place or that might be older. If you decide to go Waiting Child, that pathway, some countries will allow you to commit to that child while you are processing your home study and your dossier, but you only have 6 months in most countries from the time that you commit to get it into the country. And we're talking start to finish home study, start to finish dossier, all of your vital records in a package in 6 months. So I always like to caution friends and family that are looking at adopting a waiting child. I did that the first time. I think it's a great way if you know for sure that you want to adopt a child with special needs. I think it's great because in certain countries you can commit and then that's the child that you're going for. In other countries, you have to go there in person to commit to the child formally. But in certain countries, you do not have to do that. And you can process all of your paperwork, go to the country for court the first time, and then everything moves as normal. With that being said, please, if you have any hesitation about your financial situation or your ability to process the paperwork within the given time frame, please do not commit or sign documents for a child if you are not 100% sure that you can afford to go, 100% sure that your spouse is on board, 100% sure that you can get your home study and dossier in on time. Because in some countries, and this is a trigger warning like I said before, in some countries, it is a matter of life or death how quickly their adoptive families can get to them. And if you commit to a child while you're assembling your paperwork and then you decide that you don't want to go get them, no other family has the opportunity to pursue that child the whole time that you've committed to them. That actually happened with my daughter. There was a family that was committed to her for almost 12 months. And then right at that 12-month deadline, when it was just, they were putting pressure, we need your documents, we need your home study, right at that deadline when they had to make the payment, they decided that that international adoption wasn't right for them. For whatever reason. So that whole 12 months, my daughter could have been placed. Now it's a blessing in disguise, and I'm over the moon that we're her forever family, but in the grand scheme of things, she should have been home 18 months ago. And so this is kind of what I mean in my first video when I say it's not really the warm and fuzzy adoption kind of blog. It's an informational, but it's also necessary. This information is so necessary because there is a place for adoption. There is a place for international adoption, but there is a lot of things that are really ugly in the adoption world, and making a child wait for selfish reasons because you were unsure or because you don't have your finances in order, that is a matter of life or death in some European countries. So I just want to make that very clear that as much as I agree with the waiting child process, and I'm so thankful for the advocacy for some of these kids, don't claim them if you're not going to get them. Don't claim them if you don't have the money to put down your agency deposits, and don't claim them if there's anything going on that's going to prevent you from getting your paperwork in line. So I'll get down off of my soapbox for that. I just am very, very passionate that these kids deserve to get out quickly, and it is very selfish for American families to hold up these files for these kids and then decide not to go, or decide that their needs are too much for them and settle for a younger child. So I just encourage, do your research, keep coming back to this blog, because we'll keep deep diving into these hard topics, and we'll keep deep diving into some of the concepts that a lot of times aren't not really discussed because it's not the warm and fuzzy like we talked about before. So do me a favor and hit subscribe if you're feeling like you're getting the information that you need. Also, if you have any topics that you would like me to cover, any questions that you have, please feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll be more than happy to respond. Other than that, I look forward to catching you on the next video where we deep dive into the home study process.